In the Chicago winter of 1942, John and Marion Gacy awaited the birth of their second child. The young couple already had a daughter, but John longed for a son to carry on the family name. On March 17th, he got his wish when Marion gave birth to a boy. They named him John Wayne, after Marion's favorite movie star. The Gacy children, including a third child, Karen, born 2 years later, grew up in this modest bungalow in a blue-collar neighborhood. Gacy Sr. was an uncompromising man who demanded obedience from his children, especially his only son. He expected Johnny to be like the other boys who played stickball, climbed trees, and fished. The father would often ridicule Johnny in front of his sisters and other children in the neighborhood. Johnny not only felt alienated at home, he longed to be accepted by his classmates, but a congenital heart condition prevented him from playing with the other kids.
I was wrestling around with some older kids, and I passed out, and I remained unconscious for about 10 or 15 minutes. We went to the doctor, and they said I had an enlarged bottleneck heart, so I was more or less like a sickly kid.
Gacy's father expressed no sympathy for his son and saw the heart condition as one more failure. He pressured the boy to do well in school. Johnny disappointed his father even more when he fell behind in his studies because he was at home sick so often.
I couldn't get along with my father. I mean, he was just overbearing. I was dumb and stupid, never would amount to anything, and so I just took off and said, to hell with it.
One afternoon, while Marlene and the kids were away, John invited over 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, whose father was a JC and an Iowa State Senator. Gacy asked the teenager if he had ever watched a stag film. When he said no, John set up the projector in his basement. He got Donald drunk to lower his inhibitions, then forced himself on the boy. Young Voorhees engaged in oral sex with Gacy. Afterwards, John hinted that he had mob connections back in Chicago. He threatened the teenager and paid him $50 for his silence.
This young individual made the charge at me. He claims that he was sexually abused by me, and in essence, he was blackmailing me for it. Now, what it boiled down to was oral copulation, and it was consensual.
In December 1969, a TV film crew visited the prison to shoot a segment called Christmas at Anamosa. In this rare footage, the head cook spoke with pride about the meal he was preparing for his fellow inmates.
The men, with the exception of the turkey, which they get a generous proportion of, and the pumpkin pie that will be served, are allowed to take as much as they want to eat. The only requirement is that you eat what you take.
After his interview, Gacy joined the prison choir in singing a carol. But this holiday season would be John's worst. Back in Chicago, his father was battling cirrhosis of the liver. On Christmas morning, John Stanley Gacy died. The news devastated his son. He was convinced that his father died of shame over his sodomy conviction. Gacy's grief quickly turned to rage, which he took out on inmates he suspected were gay. One afternoon, while walking back to his cell, he spotted two prisoners having oral sex. Gacy kicked one of the men in the face, then returned to his cell.
After his father's death, a lot of hate, including that one, became much more powerful in his personality.
On June 18, 1970, prison officials released him on good behavior. He had served 16 months of his 10-year sentence. Gacy's double life had taken shape. Family, friends, and business associates had no idea who the real John Wayne Gacy was. Not only was he a prosperous entrepreneur by day, but even entertained children in hospitals. He would dress up as a clown he called Pogo.
When I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself or just let yourself go and act a fool.
Gacy would abduct teenage boys, sometimes at gunpoint, and drive them back to his suburban house, where he would rape and kill them. but he was growing tired of digging holes in his crawl space. He wanted graves readily available. Gacy hired an unsuspecting employee, David Cram, to trench for piping and instructed him to break ground only in the areas he had marked. In February 1980, 37-year-old John Wayne Gacy went on trial in Chicago for the murders of 33 young men and boys. His case attracted widespread attention as people struggled to understand how anyone could be responsible for so many appalling crimes. Hoping to save Gacy's life, his attorneys entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Gacy was no textbook criminal. Even the psychiatric experts who testified at his trial were baffled by his complex personality.
He fit absolutely nowhere. No known diagnostic categories. Part of it is because we don't know what these serial murderers are. We know what they do, but we don't know what they are.